Today our second reading was from the book of Revelation, and as I've mentioned before, Revelation is always very difficult to preach about. It's a very confusing book. But there's always things that we can learn, even from Revelation. And even if you and I can't understand the fullness of the final book of the Bible, we can take little tidbits that can help us in our lives of faith. So for instance, in our second reading, we hear of a great multitude gathered around the Lamb in worship. There's a lot of people in heaven. Innumerable, St. John says. Brothers and sisters, that gives me great hope and solace that maybe I too will be gathered together in that great multitude among the so many who are saved. Now, if we read a little bit further, we'd see that there's a lot of people in hell too, so it's a mixed bag. But we didn't hear that in our reading today. But in that great multitude, there was another little detail that St. John gives us that I think is really important for us to hear and learn today. This multitude was from every tribe and nation, people and nation, tribe and tongue. It's everybody. From every corner of the earth, from every country, every continent. They will all be gathered together in heaven. How is this possible? Well, we heard it in our first reading. Paul and Barnabas are in Pisidia, modern-day Turkey. They go to the city of Antioch. And they go to the synagogue, as is their tradition, and they tell the good news. The Messiah has come. Jesus has been raised. We should all be baptized and follow him. You know, it's very difficult for you and me to understand exactly what it was like to be in a person 2,000 years ago. And we can understand some things. Like we know there was no electricity, life was a lot harder, life expectancies were shorter, there were no police, there were no firefighters. But we even struggle to put ourselves in their mentality, to even wrap our heads around the way they viewed the world. Because back then, you weren't an individual. We view ourselves mainly as individuals. First and foremost, 2,000 years ago, you were a member of a tribe. Your identity, your value, and your future were given to you through your membership in a tribe. We, if we're of European descent, have no idea what this is like. Tribes really went away in Europe towards the end of the Roman Empire, during the conquest of Germania. We haven't had those in our cultural experience for a very long time, certainly not Americans anymore. But if you're from Africa, it's still a reality. I have a friend, Father Nicholas, went to seminary with me. Father Nicholas is from Kenya, and he is a member of the Maasai tribe. And he will tell you stories about what it means to be a Maasai, and their culture, and some of the quirky, weird stuff that they do. When you turn 16, there's a coming-of-age ceremony. It lasts 3 months. And at the end of it, you kill a lion. Pretty cool. I just got a high school diploma. Nick killed a lion. But you and I, we have no concept of this. It's so far removed from our daily lives. But for Paul and Barnabas, members of the tribe of Israel, the Hebrews, that was everything. And what do their own people say to this message of truth that they are trying to proclaim? No, because it doesn't square with my self-identity, with the image of the God and of his people that I have. But think about these two men in the particular. Both Jews, and yet, who was Paul? He was Saul. Saul, who persecuted the church. Saul, who overlooked the stoning of St. Stephen, the martyrdom, who wrapped Christians in chains and dragged them to Jerusalem for punishment. You know, if you read Acts of the Apostles, Barnabas was already part of the church with Stephen. They were likely friends. And just a few years later, Barnabas stands shoulder to shoulder with Stephen's murderer. How is this possible? Because Paul and Barnabas did it. What so many others struggled and failed to understand. What many of us today struggle and fail to understand. My value in the eyes of God does not come from the color of my skin, my membership of a tribe, the language that I speak, but because I follow the Lamb. I follow the Good Shepherd. Brothers and sisters, what we see in our second reading is our destiny, our hope, our goal, the thing for which we are working towards as Christians, as Catholics, to be gathered together in the kingdom with people of every tribe, nation, and tongue. It does not matter what we look like. It does not matter what language we speak. What matters is who do we follow. As many of you know, we have a Spanish-speaking community here at Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and our Marian crowning after Mass will actually be bilingual. I'll celebrate the 1:30 Spanish Mass this afternoon. And although I've lived in Mexico, I've lived in Colombia, South America, not Maryland, and I speak Spanish okay, I don't think for a second that I understand Latinos. It's different. My life experience is very different than theirs. And yet I know that every time I am gathered with that community, I am welcomed and embraced, not through any merit of my own, not because I am the head of this community. It is because I, you, and all Catholics have the same faith. We follow and worship the Lamb. We all hear his voice, and together we follow him. In light of this, brothers and sisters, racism, xenophobia, hatred of people that are different than me because of the way they look or the language they speak is unacceptable in our faith. Because it's nonsensical. What, do you think that you can hate people of a particular race through your whole life and then suddenly worship shoulder to shoulder with them in heaven? You'd never choose that. Because in your idea of heaven, those people aren't there. In the same way as the Jews that Paul and Barnabas were speaking to, in their idea, the Gentiles aren't there. And because of that ideology, that tribalism, they reject the gospel. And we would do the same if we held that same ideology. In light of all this, I can't help but think of Pope Leo, an American, the most pluralistic nation that's ever existed, who's also a citizen of Peru and has ministered there for a long time. He's also worked in the Vatican. His own ethnicity is very mixed, just like my own. He is the embodiment, the physical manifestation of this ideal, that we are a universal church. As Pope Francis said so often, I'll say it in his native tongue, todos Todos, everybody. Our faith, our gospel is for everyone. In our current political climate, this is coming to a head with the issue of immigration. And while we as Catholics fully believe that nations have the right and obligation to oversee who comes into their country, how many people come into their country, yes, we also believe fully that we must treat immigrants and migrants with dignity, and that we are called as Christians to always and everywhere welcome the stranger. And holding those two ideas in balance can be very difficult. And you and I and all of us can disagree about policy prescriptions. Of course. We can say the law should do this, the law should do that, find a middle ground. We can talk about policy. But when it comes to faith, if I look at people from another country, of another race, as other, then I will not have any inheritance with Jesus Christ. Because I'm not acting as he taught. I'm not acting as Paul and Barnabas taught. I'm not acting as Pope Leo XIV is beginning to teach us. Together, brothers and sisters, we must build up this community of faith, because it is a community that breaks down all divisions and gathers God's children into one. And if we want to be there in the heavenly kingdom, gathered together shoulder to shoulder with people of every nation and tongue, tribe, and people, then we need to act like it while we're on earth. We need to work towards it while we are on earth. We must put aside these differences and do our best to build up God's kingdom. A kingdom that knows no race, that has no true racial identity. But it is a kingdom of believers. And that we Catholics are willing to stand shoulder to shoulder in embracing and loving all of those who hear the voice of the Lamb and together follow him.